John Money, a man who rose to notoriety in the early 2000s in the wake of his crimes, who valued his own ego more than human life. Today, most don't recognize his name. It seems the stories of him and his victims have all become old news. But we must force ourselves to remember these harsh pasts so that we can move forward without repeating our mistakes and our meaningless sacrifices. John Money was the first academic to publish literature specifying the differences between sex and gender, clarifying that sex is what is biologically assigned and present, and gender is the psychological and cultural experience inherent in the gender binary. He coined the term gender identity, defining it as the gender a person identifies with the most and clarifying that it does not need to align with her biological sex. He also coined gender role, or the pattern of gender behavior someone exhibits. Money's contributions to the foundation of gender studies are undeniable, but they came at too high a cost. He abused his status as a medical psychology and pediatrics professor at Johns Hopkins to perform unethical experiments, playing with human lives in pursuit of proof that gender is a culturally conditioned phenomenon separate from sex. Money advocated, beginning in the 1960s, that intersex infants should undergo gender reassignment surgery to conform to the gender binary, because he thought that gender identity could be changed during the first 2 years of life. He abused his position of power at Johns Hopkins to convince parents and surgeons across the country that altering these children surgically and raising them as either a boy or a girl could normalize them into society without questioning why such normalization was necessary. It's clear that his true intentions were to seek confirmation for his theory and test whether these intersex children who were forced into a gender role without their consent or understanding would fully integrate into their assigned gender. He believed that this would prove his theory and show nurture is more important than nature, but he completely disregarded morality to seek that proof. Surgeries done on children who are not yet old enough to speak, let alone give informed consent, cannot be considered ethical research. This is only compounded when you consider that in the 1960s, phalloplasty, or the surgery to create a penis and urethra, fell significantly behind in research and technique compared to vaginoplasty, or the surgery to create a vagina, resulting in far more female gender reassignments being done than male. The surgeons of the time preferentially altered these intersex children to have female genitalia instead of male because it was easier for them. This adds yet another layer of ethical problems to Money's recommendations. The worst of Money's ethical crimes was his treatment of David Reimer's case. David was born Bruce, a baby boy who experienced a botched circumcision, resulting in the loss of his penis. His parents met with Money after seeing him on TV, where he advised them to surgically reassign Bruce's sex to female, raise him as a girl named Brenda, and withhold the truth about his sex at birth. His parents followed this advice, so Bruce underwent vaginoplasty and was raised as a girl. Money had weekly meetings with Bruce and his twin brother Brian, and throughout their childhood, he forced the two of them to act out sexual positions, which he claimed would reinforce their gender roles as man and woman. Obviously, this was wildly inappropriate and traumatizing for the children, with no basis in science. Money did not care about the well-being of the children involved, and he only wanted to prove himself right, and he was unsuccessful at that too. Bruce rejected the feminization and experienced depression and gender dysphoria throughout his youth. When his parents finally told him what had happened, he transitioned back to being a boy, adopted the name Bruce, and eventually received a phalloplasty as an adult. Unfortunately, the trauma was too great for both David and his brother, both of whom experienced sexual abuse from Money, and both completed suicide attempts in the early 2000s. Money played God instead of scientist. He entirely ignored that the results from David's case, even if they had supported his theory, would only have had a sample size of 1, and would therefore be statistically worthless. He ruined David's and Brian's lives in order to obtain data that would never amount to more than a case study, showing Money acted not with the mentality of a researcher and pursuer of knowledge, but as an egocentric man obsessed with proving himself right. John Money contributed to the foundation of the field of gender studies, but because of the high human cost to his single-minded search for validation, he should not be credited as the father of gender theory. The modern field of gender studies must acknowledge those who were unjustly sacrificed and abused by money, like David Reamer and Brian Reamer, in order to learn from and never repeat John Money's mistakes and atrocities.